This is the life story of Mr. Man Kong.
Hello, I'm Mr. Man Kong. How do you do?
I am quite well, thank you. Now let's get to the point. Why did you come to America, Mr. Man Kong? What did you seek?
I come to America for many reasons. First reason, for economic prosperity.
Part 1. Immigration and the Gold Rush. Chinese people came over because the Chinese economy was bad and poverty led to many of them coming to California in search of gold and other economic opportunities. At first, they were wealthy merchants, skilled artisans, fishermen, and hotel or restaurant owners that found the economic opportunities they were looking for. Americans even tended to like them because of their skills. They were often hard workers that Americans could rely on. As the time passed, more and more Chinese immigrated to California. By 1851, there were 25,000 Chinese working in California.
So, Mr. Man Kong, did you end up finding economic prosperity?
Yes, I find little gold. It makes me very happy.
Oh, she's a gold digger. Way over town. That digs on me.
Now I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke niggas. Now I ain't saying she a gold digger. Now I ain't saying she a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no.
But that's not how the white businessman worked. I was an employee of a company who kept my gold.
A foreign miners' tax was passed in 1852, meant to cause economic problems for the Chinese gold miners. The American gold miners were upset that the Chinese were finding more gold because they believed they deserved it. The tax required the Chinese to pay $3 each month, when most of them were only making $6. Tax collectors took or sold the land of the miners who either couldn't or refused to pay it. Many fake tax collectors came onto the scene, making a fortune by tricking the immigrants who couldn't speak English very well. Part 2. The Transcontinental Railroad. Mr. Crocker helped employ the workforce for the Central Pacific Railroad Company.
So, Mr. Kong, who employed you?
Mr. Crocker. Mr. Crocker, very nice man.
While other whites believed that the Chinese were incapable of being efficient workers, Charles Crocker gave them a chance due to labor shortages. Crocker realized that the Chinese were very hard workers and worked for 1/3 of the pay of an average white worker. Later, he recruited more Chinese workers from California and China to help complete his project, which was the western part of the Transcontinental Railroad. The Pacific Railroad Act was passed by Congress in 1862. It connected the east and west coasts by the first transcontinental railroad. The Union Pacific Railroad Company started building in Omaha, Nebraska, moving westward, and the Central Pacific Railroad Company started at the same time in Sacramento, California, building east.
So, Mr. Kong, what type of work did you do on the railroad?
I have tough job. I work with dynamite to help build tunnels. Boom!
Gotta get. Boom, boom, boom. Gotta get. Boom, boom, boom. Gotta get. Boom, boom, boom.
The Chinese were given the toughest jobs during the creation of the Transcontinental Railroad, such as creating tunnels, which was sometimes done by lowering them down in baskets. The Chinese built 15 tunnels, the longest being 1,659 feet. Most were 32 feet high and 16 feet wide. During the making of the Transcontinental Railroad, the first Chinese were hired in 1865 to do the blasting and laying foundation for the railroad. Estimates say that about 10,000 Chinese men died from dynamite building on the railroad. Without the Chinese, it would have been impossible to finish the western portion of the railroad with the time allotted. Part 3. Anti-Chinese feelings and acts against them. Chinese people, although appreciated at first for their hard work, later became hated because they were coming over in much larger numbers and taking the jobs of Americans by working for a much lower wage. The average Chinese got between $26 and $35 a month compared to the average white who got $36 a month, as well as food and lodging, while the Chinese provided their own. Dennis Kearney was at first on the side of the Chinese, believing that they should no longer be harmed. Later, he switched sides and became against the Chinese, resulting in him becoming the leader of the Workingmen's Party. The Workingmen's Party was a group of nativists who wanted to give American jobs to Americans. Surgeon Walter Wyman was anti-Chinese and demanded that San Francisco's Chinatown be put under quarantine because he believed that the Chinese people had an outbreak of the bubonic plague. However, Governor Henry Gage stated that this act was a violation of the 14th Amendment and this plan was shut down.
Mr. Kong, were you ever discriminated against?
Yes, I get beat up by white industrial workers.
The Chinese were hated so much that in 1870 a Naturalization Act was passed, followed by the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. The Naturalization Act was put in place to keep Chinese from becoming citizens, while the Exclusion Act kept them out of America altogether. It was passed in Congress with the excuse that it was to prevent an excess of cheap labor. However, the Chinese already in America were allowed to stay and were given certificates to prove that they had already come over.
What's next for you, Mr. Kong?
I go back home to China and hope to find economic prosperity there.
Well, good luck with that. Thank you for your interview.
Hey.